my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands afar and wide. This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine.
Hi, this is Marjohn Love, and this is Marjohn's Musings. And today's show is Adventures in Allentown. Last time I talked to you about the fact that I was planning to run away to Allentown, Pennsylvania, so that I could go to the International Women's Writing Guild annual summer workshop. I hadn't been in quite a few years. It got quite expensive. This time, between the gas to get there and the Easy Pass tolls and the tuition, I must have spent over $1,400 to go away for a week. And there are a lot of people who would like to write who can't afford that. For a couple of years, I didn't go. But there was more going on than just the price. The International Women's Writing Guild used to meet at Skidmore in upstate New York. And due to several complicated reasons, Skidmore and the Guild parted company, and they bounced around for a while. I wound up going to my last IWWG at Brown. And at that conference, the founder, Hannelore Hahn, appointed her daughter her successor, which distressed a lot of people who had worked for up to 31 years, building the guild and teaching the classes and organizing the events. Because there's several events. There's also the Big Apple event where writers who are ready to pitch their books go to New York City and meet agents and representatives of publishers. And then there's an event out in California that I have not attended, so I can't really speak to that one. But Kevin and I went to the Soldiers and Sailors Home because Kevin's a soldier, and the nightly fee there is way less money than any hotel in New York City. And we walked 6 blocks to Park Avenue, and we went to the Big Apple conference. It was a bit daunting. I had to pitch my book in a room full of people standing in line to pitch their book to agents. But when Hannelore chose her daughter, who was not a published author and had not taught classes and basically came as mom's sidekick to the events, when Hannelore appointed her daughter her successor, she caused kind of a schism in the group. And I thought about that long and hard lately because Hannelore wasn't there this year at Muhlenberg. And I spoke to several of the teachers, and they said, yeah, Muhlenberg is our new home. And Muhlenberg is a lovely campus. It's quite a hike. I'm one of these people, when I travel, I get nervous. And so I had my husband print out a map from Rockport to Allentown, Pennsylvania, with the routes on it. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute, I don't want to go through New York City. And I most assuredly don't want to drive through Hartford, Connecticut. And so we printed out all these step-by-step directions. Boy, was I glad when my GPS did not work properly in the pouring rain on what Google Maps said was going to be 5.5 hours that took 10.5 hours to get there. Part of that was Friday summer weekend traffic, having nothing to do with the length of the trip, but more the parking lot you sat in for a while. And then when Google Maps gives you an estimated drive, they don't take into consideration that you might need the ladies' room, or you might get hungry, or maybe a cup of coffee would keep you awake on the road. So it was 10.5 hours to get to Muhlenberg. And when I got there, I was handed a conference guide with all the rules and the regulations and the guidelines for what was and what was not appropriate, how to get onto the internet, things you needed to know. And I was handed a map of the college campus, and the young lady put a great big purple magic marker circle. You are here, and by the way, this is your dorm. And on the little black and white map, they showed you where parking was prohibited. And I was living here, and several blocks away was my parking lot where I was to keep my car. Well, that worked out okay because the planners of the conference knew quite a few of the guild members are like me, were middle-aged women or older. And so they set up for a shuttle bus to take people from the dorms to their cars, from their cars to the Union building, which was lovely, by the way, where in the Union building is the dining hall. And this year, because people got lost in Yale, going building to building throughout the city, or, they had problems at Brown too. When you're in a city campus and you're walking through city streets to get to buildings, it was hard, and there was a lot of downtime because you had to allow more walking time between classes. All of our classes were in this one central area, which was a bit boring and a little confining, but it was also really convenient, especially for people that were on walkers or used canes or were in powered wheelchairs. So you get to the conference and they hand you one of these handy-dandy workshop bags and a folder to keep all your goodies in, and I'd show it to you, but it's a high gloss and it'll glare on the cameras. And then over the course of the week, you put all your handouts in your folder to keep them in order, and so that you can easily find things like the 15% off coupon at the Muhlenberg bookstore, which I made really good use of. I bought myself a new thermos for my car that actually fits in the cup holder, and I bought a poster of an alphabet by the Dalai Lama to put up on my wall. For those of you who've never lived in a dorm room, it's a rather daunting experience in the beginning. You walk into this room that when I was a little girl and I went to Catholic school, the nuns would have called a cell. And it's not that different from a prison cell. You walk in and there's a plastic-covered mattress on a metal-framed bed that could be a bunk bed, and in double rooms they are bunk beds, but in my room I chose a single. I'm 65. I lived in a quad with 3 of the teachers at the conference, but they were dear friends and had known each other for years, and here I am, the third thumb a little bit. But I knew I was going to a dorm room. I think sometimes people of color who don't have a big go-off-to-college budget have difficulty living in a dorm because you get one fitted sheet, one flat sheet, one cotton blanket, one thin towel that's small, and one washcloth. And then there's a bare desk and a bare bookcase and a little dresser and a chifforobe to hang your clothes in. And you have a window. Mine happened to look out on a cinder block wall. I was in a quad, so the little sitting area looked out on a baby tree. The trees at Muhlenberg, they must have like a tree planting program. I took a selfie with one of them because it was absolutely gorgeous. It was one of these trees you had to crane your neck like this to see the top of it. There were yard sculptures, and the red one, you know, the modern art one, was picked up by lawn furniture out on the common. I liked the statue of Muhlenberg himself. And because I told you, you know, the UCC in Rockport has been working on the clock tower and bell tower at the church, it was interesting to me that there at Muhlenberg there's a crane and they're working on their clock tower. I slept in on Sunday. I was tired and I didn't make it to the chapel. I had planned to go to the chapel and I didn't go. And I felt a little odd about it, but sometimes when you're at one of these events, you get up at 6 because you share a shower with 3 other women, and you share one toilet with 3 other women, and there's 2 sinks to brush your teeth with a mirror to comb your hair and whatever. I should have brought a mirror to my dorm room, but I figured, hey, I know what I look like, so I didn't bother. And later on, I kind of was like, yeah, you know, when you tell yourself to do something, you ought to try to do it. So why did I go to the conference? Well, I have a mentor by the name of Myra Shapiro. She's a poet, and she's also an extraordinary teacher. And I wanted to see her. She's getting rather elderly. She was only going to be there Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and I think Tuesday, and then the rest of the week she would be gone. So I went to her class for the first few days, but I always love the arts and crafts classes. One year I made masks, and another year I made a doll, and then I went back and I made another mask a different year. I really enjoy the opportunity to be with other writers doing manipulative activities with art material. They open up and they laugh and they tease and they talk, and you get to see another side of them than the side you see when they stand up at the podium and are given 3 minutes at open mic to do their reading. But Myra had her class at the same time as Deborah's class, and I apologized to Deborah and I said, listen, I really have to go to Myra's class, but I'll join your class if it's okay on Wednesday. And she says, oh, you're welcome anytime. You don't have to wait until Wednesday, but if you do, you're more than welcome. So Myra's class, she hands out poems on Xerox copies, and every day we recite one poem that she picks for the year, so that by the end of the week, we've recited it often enough that if you're young and agile of mind, you've now committed that poem to memory and can recite it impromptu like I do this show. You don't need a cheat sheet. I just found the similarity of her teaching to other years that I went very reassuring. You know, here you're in a new place, quite a few new people. Some of the older teachers that I really respected and enjoyed have passed away. They weren't there, they've died. And so every year there's a bit of a transition because new members come and older members pass, and some members don't come every year. Like I said, I hadn't gone in several years. So Myra handed us out the Lament for Makers. Not bird, not badger, not beaver, not bee. Many creatures must make, but only one must seek within itself to make. My father's ring was a bee with a dart through it, in diamonds against polished black stone. I have it. What parents leave you is their lives. Until my mother died, she struggled to make a house she did not loathe, paintings, poems, and me. Many creatures must make, but only one must seek within itself what to make. Not bird, not badger, not beaver, not bee. Teach me, masters, who by making were remade, your art. And that's by Frank Beedart, which is interesting because his dad's signet ring was Beedart. You know, I thought that was great. Myra had to go in for knee surgery, serious knee surgery. And that's why she wouldn't be at the full conference. And she picked a poem for us that I think expressed more about how she was feeling than just academic interest. Things Seem Strong by Jane Hirschfield. Things seem strong, houses, trees, trucks, a chair even, a table. You don't expect one to break. No, it takes a hammer to break one, a war, a saw, an earthquake. Troy after Troy after Troy seemed strong to those living around and in them. 9 Troys were strong, each trembling under the other. When the ground floods, the fire ants leave their strong city. They link legs and form a raft and float and live and begin again elsewhere. Strong your life's wish to continue linking arms with life's eye blink, life's tear well, life's hammering of copper sheets and planning of Port Orford cedar, life's joke of the knock-knock. Knock-knock? Who's there? I am. I am who? That first and last question. Who once dressed in footed pajamas? Who once was smothered in kisses? Who seemed so strong? I could not imagine your mouth would ever come to stop asking. Very powerful piece of poetry. And Myra would do things like hand us out, with permission, a poem by Sharon Olds, The Alarm Clock. And it's typed up, but it's in rough draft form. And you see all the hatch marks and the crossing out and the circles and the arrows and the additions, because she wanted to instruct us in the ways to refine a poem, to perfect a poem. Poems very rarely come out perfectly formed the first time. I find the poets at IWWG are different from one another. And we'll talk about a couple of the other teachers too. But Myra writes from the 5 senses and her heart. Whereas when I get to Marjohn is an analytical poet. She writes the craft and art of poetry. They're quite different. I have to give you a little backstory. This poem is called This Heart, and it's for Harold, and it's written by Myra Shapiro. And it makes a whole lot more sense if you know that Harold died about 1.5 years ago. Yes, I know I want what's real. So the seal, stamped solid brass, fastened to the glass convinces me to buy this picture frame. Only a teenager would go for a lover with bad taste. It's not easy being tacky, risking a cliché to say, I love you. Poetry from such a place as have a heart must be an urge to have one, to say yes to your Polaroid and yes to all the plastic of our clumsy lives, yes to the hokum and the hooey. Of marriage neither young nor pure, there's a porno thrill I get in giving you this frame, in loving you with my eyes open. This poem is by Alan Shapiro, and he does an homage to William Blake. It's called Sunflower, and the quote that opens the poem is, "Ah, sunflower, weary of time, Blake." Now, Alan, no pitying, for this one, no weariness about it or wanting in the upward heave of its furred stalk, curving and open out into a cup of pointy leaves, each leaf alert with tiny quills, spines, prickles, and then an offset line. Did I say cup of leaves? Say shield instead, say living crucible from which flames burst with such sticky brightness that they suck sunlight down into the inflorescent burning pit of itself. Did I say sunflower? Say instead, don't ever mess with me. Say, there is nothing I won't do to live. This one's called Stone. It's by Charles Simi. Go inside a stone. That would be my way. Let somebody else become a dove or gnash with tiger's tooth. I am happy to be a stone. From the outside, the stone is a riddle. No one knows how to answer it. Yet within, it must be cool and quiet, even though a cow steps on it full weight, even though a child throws it in a river. The stone sinks slow, unperturbed, to the river bottom, where fishes come to knock on it and listen. I have seen sparks fly out when two stones are rubbed, so perhaps it is not dark inside after all. Perhaps there is a moon shining from somewhere as though behind a hill. Just enough light to make out the strange writings, the star charts on the inner walls. Myra is like such a hot ticket, you know. I go out of her class going, whew. She had us do a writing, and one of the women in the class is Hispanic, and so she read La Luna in Spanish. I'm a little shy to try it. My accent is old and my Spanish is high school. So I'll read it to you in English. The moon, sad in her loneliness, in spite of living among stars, swaying in her hammock in the sky, wishes desperately to be on earth. She lies down in the bottom of any puddle. So I told you one of the reasons that I decided to go to IWWG came out of courage to imagine. And it's kind of interesting for me that today is July 31st, and in this book, for July 31st, although it's for 2017, is a poem, Inspiration, a prayer. In the stillness, I turn to the divine light within and become open and receptive to inspiring ideas for my life. In this awareness, I understand all that is mine to do and follow through with ease, grace, and perfect timing. I go forward to abundant living, confident of God's love and wisdom within me. It's kind of hard, when you drive 10 hours each way and you go to a social breakfast and then 5 collegiate classes, one right after the other. And in the middle, you have a social lunch, and then you have a social dinner. And then in the evening, you have open mic, or you have plays, or you have the Judy Beach Bazaar. Judy Beach is one of those lovely women that I got to know in 2002 through 2009, and Judy has passed away. I painted a picture for Judy, but they now hold a bazaar in her honor, and I took all those scars that I hung up in the last show and I put them in a bag that said the Riviera, and I brought them down, and Kevin helped me find racks. And at the Judy Beach Bazaar, which was 2 nights, I was given a sign to advertise myself and my wares. And it was really interesting for me because sometimes experiences have to stretch you, which is not always comfortable. I had to learn how to use a square register. I sold $95 worth of scarves, and fortunately, one woman paid cash and another woman paid by check. Both of those I understand completely. But Deborah had to help me learn how to figure out my square register. And Deborah did 2 workshops, one of which she called the Sacred Vessel. And it started out as a little cardboard bowl, not even plastic coated, just a cardboard bowl. And she had tables of fabric and fancy goodies, beads, and there was a cross and little hearts. And one was to make this bowl to offer up to the universe a deep wish of one's soul. And you could decorate it any way you wanted to. And there was a materials fee. And I found it kind of sad that the materials fee was only $10 for the class. And in the end, she put a folded dollar back into your bowl with a blessing. The Sacred Vessel, the extraordinary power of empty spaces. This workshop is designed to help us live with the idea that our lives are precious and can have meaning and purpose according to how we fill them. We create a vessel as a symbolic reminder of the preciousness of our lives. By making a vessel, we are actually preparing a place for the awesome and soulful gifts that come with being alive in our bodies. How our vessel serves ourselves and our community depends in a large part on the choices we make. Place your vessel on your altar or other sacred space, and when an idea about something I would like to do or be emerges, I write it out and place it in the vessel, knowing that my inner being is working on my behalf. And so it took us 2 days to Mod Podge the outside and let it dry and paint the inside and decorate it. And then at the end, she did a little invocation, a blessing, and she put $1 in each bowl, folded in a peculiar way. And I thought, but I didn't wish for money. My wish was for love. And then I looked at the way she folded the dollar, and she folded it so that it says, "In God we trust, one." I found that fascinating. And I found this string art and a feather, and I put them together with the 4 hearts in the bowl. And since I'm from Cape Ann, I had to put in a fish and a crystal. But in Dorothy Randall Gray's class, she did something that I've known Dorothy since she helped sponsor me in 2002. And Dorothy always has wonderful handouts, and she has books up on that she has out of Amazon. And she handed out papers for us to write our fears on, or our blockages. What was stopping us from pursuing our writing or getting our writing published? And mine was fear. As a child, I heard many stories of people who achieved fame and financial success, and their lives were ruined. I'm almost as afraid of success as I am of failure. So I put fear on my little slip of paper. And in the past, Dorothy liked to sit outside on the grounds, on the lawn at Skidmore. And she would bring a bowl, a special bowl, and she would burn our blockages or our fears. So that's what I expected her to do. And instead, she brought a large cooking bowl, like a chrome cooking bowl, and had water in it. And she put our blockages, my fear, someone else's anger, someone else's anxiety, someone else's worry about other people's judgment, someone else's internal critic, and she put them in the water, stirred them up, and they dissolved, they melted. And afterward, I wondered if this special paper was made out of those eco-friendly peanuts that are made out of corn, and you stick them in your sink and put the sprayer on them and they go down the drain. She handed out silver and gold. She wanted us to write about breaking bread. Somehow that made me think of communion rather than like a social meal. So I wrote, somehow religious zealots and atheists took prayer out of our schools. They denied the existence of hell. Our children no longer learn the dichotomy of good and evil. But the stealth theft of heaven and the dissolution of the body of Christ occurred when trusted patriarchs succumbed to the deadly sin of lust. Life is often difficult. The hope of heaven was a balm for our forefathers. The fear of hell stood as governor on the selfish and hurtful impulses of those in power. To be a member of Corpus Christi made each active individual perceive the family of man as brothers and sisters. Bear with me, children of God, for if God is the ground of all being, we are one in God. And then I felt like I was done, and she's like, no, you need to keep writing. We all had to keep writing. So I wrote out questions since I didn't have any more answers. Is God broken? Or is it only my heart, which longs to know my existence arose before I was born, and that those I loved still exist in the realm of spirit? Am I a throwback? Am I naive? No. I am a fragment of the cosmic whole, searching for my sullied connection to the divine, because I still need to belong to the great beloved. I went to see a man of his word. It was about Pope Francis. It got me thinking of my Catholic heritage. Saint Anthony, protect me. And Joseph, the provider. I don't always understand all of Catholicism. I have a friend who's Greek Orthodox Catholic. I was at her wedding. She was at mine. Some of the practices were strange. The language was different. The look of the inside of the church was different. And yet, I heard Pope Francis talk to not only every conceivable flavor of Catholic, but also Protestants and Buddhists. And I watched him with the head of the Hebrew nation and dealing with Muslims. And the movie, A Man of His Word, is most assuredly a promotional piece that was carefully edited and crafted to tell a specific story. But on the flip side, I found myself nodding my head when the Pope spoke. And he speaks in Spanish. He's from Argentina. It was interesting to me. He's the first South American Pope and the only Pope to ever choose the name of Saint Francis. And in the movie, there's a black and white movie I watched as a child in Catholic school of the life of Saint Francis. I think it was a silent movie, or it had subtitles. That originally it had been filmed in Italian. And of course it was being taught to American children, so they needed to put in English. I thought about the practice of baptism and how you dip your fingers in holy water and cross yourself as you enter and leave a church. I think my grandmother Mary would be proud of Pope Francis. I think Pope Francis would validate her faith. But back to IWWG. This is a little piece from Sharing the Same Sky by Dorothy Randall Gray that she wrote in 2015. Apples. I have been taught by apples. We talked together on a red day when the sun made us both shine. They spoke of Dylan Thomas and of vows. Never to go gentle into the night, never surrender to teeth or forced entry without a fight, without spitting into the perpetrator's eyes as the enemy struggles for territory gained. I have been taught by apples to polish my act, to face the world with color and rounded edges, not to show bruises when hurt until I am alone and can cry in peace. I did a whole show on Me Too and Time's Up. I have a friend in IWWG, and I've known her, oh my goodness, 16 years. And Her name is Sue Huggins, and I got to have meals with her. And she did a one-woman play, a 12-minute play called The Way Out. I haven't seen it yet. I'm looking kind of forward to it with a little anxiety because it's a Me Too play. There was a beautiful young girl I'd never met before. It was her first year. And she stood up at open mic and did a Me Too rant. And later on, when we sat in the Red Door, which is a little bar cafe at the university, she told me she'd been raped. And I looked at this buxom, beautiful young woman, and I thought, of course you were. I was really, really proud of Pope Francis for talking about pedophilia and sexual impropriety and saying there would be zero tolerance. Zero, he repeats it, zero tolerance. I was like, yes, finally. But plays. Kelly Dumar did a play lab, and in the play lab, participants who chose to take that track wrote plays, and then they performed them for us. And so some of the spouses and friends of the playwrights got up and were the actors, and we got to see the plays performed. That's something like if you wanted to learn to write plays, Kelly does a playwriting workshop. One of the things about IWWGs is kind of strange is one of the first things you do when you get there is they give you your name tag, and there's a pile of stickers and whatever to decorate your name tag. And then you have your room key and your meal card in a lanyard on your chest with your name tag. And they passed out name place cards to put in front of yourself so that as you were in classes asking questions and responding, that the other participants got an opportunity to see who was speaking, to read their name. That's something new since last time I was with them, and I found it kind of interesting. One of the reasons I went this year was because of Caridad Pinero. She did a commercial fiction workshop on how to get your fiction polished, structured, the whole thing, and ready for publication. And one of her workshops is social media and how to protect your work. And she has all these handouts, which for me, this is like a text. I need to go over this again because the work is important and needs to be protected. I went to Paula Chafee-Scartamatia's workshop, and it was a similar theme on how to get your stuff together, but very practical. Crash course on pitches and queries. How do you contact an agent or an editor or a publisher? And then homework sheets on queries and pitches and query samples, long and short. But Paula's kind of an interesting person. I've shared with you some of my cards. Paula started her workshop with the why me, and why now about publishing your work. Because many of us write to write. We write for the expressive catharsis of writing. And then there comes a point where some of us choose to share our work. So she had cards spread out on a table, 2 different decks, one of which I'd never seen before. And I would have brought it to show it to you today, but when I went on Amazon and I looked up the author and I found the cards and they were for sale and I put them in my cart, I got the Spinning Beach Ball of Death. And I didn't understand whether I was being hacked and blocked from buying these cards, or somebody didn't like the author and blocked the sale of her cards with a virus. I was not able to purchase the cards Paula had to bring here today. I could have gotten them and had them on 2-day delivery and brought them to you. But I was prohibited by the spinning beach ball of death, which I think is a little virus. I'm like, oh boy. But the card was like so stunning to me that I picked. She wanted you to do an intention. And my intention was I wanted to get Saigon's Deadly Game properly published because Amazon is doing nothing for me. It is sitting on Amazon. It'll be 3 years, August 31st. And outside of my own family and friends and people at my church, nobody's buying the book because nobody knows it's there. And so I showed you my crazy business cards. Well, I passed out almost all of those business cards, and I put up posters when I was selling my scarves so that people could see that I was an author and these were my books. And they were like, well, can I buy a copy? And I'm like, yes, you can. And it goes on your Kindle. And I handed them the card with the URL. I haven't had the courage to go online to see if anybody actually bought the book. Several people said they would. I don't know that anyone did. But Colette Baron Reed cards were on the table, and I picked mine with the intent, how do I properly publish Saigon's Deadly Game? And the card I got was a man's face, the muse, in a glass case with the door shut, and between the front glass and the man's face is a lace curtain set up as a Victorian wrought iron fence. And underneath that was a chessboard set up to play with a delicate looking hand holding up this heavy chessboard and all the pieces. And in the middle of the chessboard is a fortune cookie. And underneath, like a banner in an old silent film, it says, "Not for you." And Paula said, that's very profound. Look at how profound that card is. I've never seen the card come up before, but isn't your book set in the East? I said, yeah, it's set in Vietnam. She goes, well, the closest they could come to it was a fortune cookie. It says no open. And she says, I find it kind of interesting because you've already put it on Amazon. You cannot pitch this book to a regular publisher. And I was like, what? It was like a hard thing. It was a hard thing. So I have 6 minutes to tell you 20 things. And I have to now edit on the fly to try to figure out what out of all the things should I tell you in my 5 minutes and 56 seconds. Well, I'll tell you 2 things. I went to the bookstore and the Muhlenberg M looks very much like the branding M I use, the font brush strokes for Marjohn's Musings. So I bought 2 of them, and I'm going to make my car have car art, and I'm going to go around MM everywhere so that I can use my car as a moving billboard to advertise this television show. The other thing I want to share with you is I won a book. While I was there, I got this card from the Guild, thank you, and I got Julie Maloney's book, A Matter of Chance. It was kind of a fun thing to have happen. Linda Leedy Schneider does poetry as well. And she did a handout. I'm going to read you. You, reading this, be ready. Starting here, what do you want to remember? How sunlight creeps along a shining floor? What scent of old wood hovers? What softened sound from outside fills the air. Will you ever bring a better gift for the world than the breathing respect that you carry wherever you go right now? Are you waiting for time to show you some better thoughts? When you turn around, starting here, lift this new glimpse that you found. Carry into evening all that you want from this day. This interval you spent reading or hearing this, keep it for life. What can anyone give you greater than now? Starting here, right in this room, when you turn around. And that's by William Stafford. That was one of the handouts by Linda Leedy Schneider. Dorothy Randall Gray did a piece on wabi-sabi. I brought you in the little wabi-sabi book. I will keep broken things in my house. There remains an honored shelf on which I will keep broken things. Their beauty is they need not ever be fixed. And so Dorothy gave us gold paper and had us try to write poetry about what was broken, because in Japan, when a beautiful piece of pottery is broken, they repair it with gold so that the restored object is even more precious than it was originally. And that prompt led me to Deborah's class, where I made my offering bowl. I started this Zen poems book when I was in Amsterdam. I got it at the Van Gogh Museum. But there was a poem in here that kind of made me think a lot about saying goodbye to the women. You become so close to these women. You know, you're there for a week, 5 classes a day, every meal. Saying goodbye to the monk Wunan. Each 5 years we meet, then grieve when we must part. It has taken only 3 farewells for 15 years to pass. I recall how I tried to study meditation with you, but I was like a yellow poplar, which grows for a while, then shrinks again. 100 times I heard you lecture, but my mind remained a tangled knot. I was like a man born blind who has never seen red or purple. Try explaining the difference to him, and the more you speak, the more confused he'll get. I can't bear to leave you now, but it is impossible for us to stay together. It is October. The river winds are blowing hard. Please let your hair grow back in to protect your head from cold. Marge was so powerful, I think I'm going to have to talk about her next show. But the idea of leaving old friends, not knowing if you'll see them again, that's a tough one. That's all we have time for today. I wanted to tell you about William Ackerman and The Wheel, which I've been listening to nonstop. But I hope that's enough for one show. This is Marjohn Love, and this has been Marjohn's Musings.